nobody present, with nothing present, no books, no utensils to write, no television, no radio. He's stripped of all of his clothes, and he has a police officer, a correction officer, who basically sits at the doorway and monitors his every move. As a result of being placed on suicide watch, he's been placed in segregated population, not in his regular cell, and he's not able to do the things that he has done over the last 12 months to try to make himself a better person. Specifically, he's been continuing his education in jail. He's been attending NA meetings and substance abuse meetings with the mental health counselors. Currently, all of those services have been suspended. Since Mr. Hernandez's suicide, Kyle has been taken from his normal group of support staff and friends as well and isolated. He wants to be put back into the situation that he was in before this and doesn't feel like he should be placed on suicide watch. He remains in good spirits, but he is still perplexed as to why that's going on. My client has also relayed to me that he and Aaron Hernandez were close friends and spent a great deal of time together in prison. My client has informed me that at some point in time in the near future, he personally will discuss the nature and the extent of the relationship between he and Aaron Hernandez. My client has advised me that any discussions relating to that relationship will come directly from his mouth, so there's no confusion. My client would also like to state that at no point in time has he been interviewed or asked any questions from any member of the media personally as it relates to his relationship with Aaron Hernandez. As to the letters left behind by Mr. Hernandez, my client does firmly believe that one of the letters was written to him. This is coming from his own knowledge of the relationship that he and Aaron had shared, and it comes from somebody inside of the jail, and I don't have a name for you, who indicated to him that one of the letters was to him. We have also learned that the third letter, which is in existence, is currently being held by the Worcester District Attorney's Office. We have requested, on behalf of my client, a copy of that letter. To date, none has been presented to us. We have also requested from the attorney who went to the court and obtained the suicide notes that he release a copy of that letter to us so that we The client believes that that might be because the letter was written in accordance with the language typically used behind the walls of a jail. So he believes that he could potentially decipher what that letter says. So I'm calling on Attorney Byers to release that letter to us. I can also confirm to you that my client was told by Aaron Hernandez prior to his death that he was going to be the recipient of an approximately $50,000 watch that Mr. Hernandez had left to my client. I can tell you that the circumstances around that watch were also made known to my client. Specifically, that the watch was purchased by Aaron in Las Vegas. It was a custom-made watch for him with a price tag of $47,000. The watch is the same watch that is seen in a picture of Mr. Hernandez with the Souza, which we have a copy for you today. I can confirm that obviously while in jail, my client was not able to receive this gift, but Aaron had told him that arrangements would be made for that gift to be sent to him when he was on the outside, or alternatively, from a member of his inner circle to be delivered to my client's family. I can indicate to you at this point in time, we have not received the watch or any other personal property from Aaron Hernandez. I can also confirm at this point in time that in approximately September of 2016, Mr. Hernandez and my client had requested through the regular course of events at the Shirley House of Correction to be cellmates. The request, while initially approved, was later terminated by the supervisor of the jail. The issues, as my client understands them, was the size difference between Aaron Hernandez and himself. The superintendent of the jail had informed him that they typically attempt to house prisoners of the same race and of basically the same size, so that if an altercation breaks out, there's at least the appearance of equity. My understanding is that because of the size difference between my client and Aaron Hernandez, that offer was later terminated. I can also with my client's family on top of my client. They're very personal letters, and they speak candidly of the close friendship and the mutual respect that my client and Mr. Hernandez had for one another. Mr. Hernandez refers to my client in both letters not by his legal name only, but also by his prison name of Pure. I'm going to read one line from the letter that was written by Mr. Hernandez in September of 2016 to Kyle Kennedy's father. Mr. Kennedy, it's Aaron. I'm writing to you and Pure doesn't know. I wrote to him just to let him know that I wrote to you out of respect for him. He's my brother, and he always will be. The balance of the letters will remain confidential at this point in time. Mr. Hernandez also wrote letters to Kyle's siblings, stepsister, and stepbrothers. That is the end of the statement that I'm prepared to make at this point in time. Other than I have met with my client twice at Shirley. I will hopefully be meeting with him again Thursday of this week. He does want to tell his story, but at this point in time, based on his situation in the jail, it's an impossibility. I'll take a few brief questions.
Did your client have a gay relationship with Aaron Hernandez?
I'm not at liberty to discuss the nature and the extent of that relationship. My client has made it very clear that he will, in fact, talk about that relationship, the nature and the extent, but he wants those words to come directly from his mouth to the world.
Did your client have any idea that Aaron Hernandez was going to commit suicide?
My client was stunned and saddened by the news of the suicide. He was told at 6:30 the next morning that Aaron Hernandez had taken his life. My client, quite frankly, told me that he thought it was a joke, that he thought that the people in the jail were playing a game on him because they knew of the closeness of the relationship between the two. My client remembered at that point in time a letter that he received from Mr. Hernandez approximately 3 weeks earlier, where Mr. Hernandez did state, "I think I'm going to hang it up, LOL." My client at the time didn't read into that, thought it was a joke, but obviously 3 weeks later when we see what happened, it has a different meaning for him.
What were the terms of him receiving the watch?
The watch was given to my client, unlike has been reported at the end of Mr. Hernandez's life, actually on my client's 22nd birthday on August 27, 2016.
And it was given to his family? Was it physically passed over? Or?
My client's family has not received the watch. What my client has told me was that because he was incarcerated, my client was scheduled to get out, or is scheduled to get out as early as February of 2018, that he would get it upon his release. But if anything should happen, he would make plans for that watch to be delivered by some of his friends or family, and I don't know who that is.
Does your client have any proof of this, apart from written? Is there any written proof that Hernandez meant this watch to go to your client?
At this point in time, my client has nothing in his possession that would verify that, other than the conversations between he and
Aaron Hernandez has a 4-year-old daughter. Why should Mr. Kennedy get this watch and not her?
Well, I'm not saying that she should or he should or anybody else should. That's not my decision to make. All I'm suggesting.
But it sounds like you clearly are interested in trying to get the watch for your client.
I'm not interested in any of that. That's not what I have said. What I have said is that Aaron Hernandez has told my client that he was giving him this watch. He described the watch to him. He told him the circumstances around obtaining that watch. He told him where he acquired that watch and how he had it made. Now, when that happened, understand, this was months before the suicide. So I don't know what was going on in Aaron Hernandez's head when he decided to make that gift to Kyle Kennedy. And I don't know if that changes now, or I don't think anybody can, quite frankly. All I can tell you is in August of 2016, that's what was said between my client and Mr. Hernandez.
Was the third letter addressed to Kyle himself or by his nickname Pure? Is that why you're having trouble getting possession of it?
So there's obviously issues with us getting possession of, because my understanding is there's nobody's name that it's addressed to. So when you look at these statements saying there was never a letter addressed to Kyle Kennedy or any other prisoner, I believe that's 100% accurate.
But what makes you think it was? When you say it was somewhat, was it coded? When you say incoherent, what do you mean?
I was told by a source that the letter, that parts of the letter didn't make a lot of sense. When I explained that to my client informed me that there's a certain language that's spoken in a written form in a prison that is made that way so that it appears incoherent, and others don't necessarily understand what the meaning is.
So like a code, like a
Correct.
prison code.
Yes.
Understanding
Larry-
you don't want to get into the nature of the relationship between the two of them, is there anything in any of the letters that can better elaborate what that relationship is beyond Kyle Kennedy's work?
I will tell you that there are portions of letters that I have seen that were addressed to members of Kyle's family that talk about the depth of the relationship between Aaron Hernandez and Kyle Kennedy.
Unequivocally,
Unequivocally what?
that it would put to rest what exactly their relationship was, whether they were lovers or not.
Well, I didn't say that. I'm going to be very clear on that. I never said that the letters said that they were lovers. And I'm not at liberty to say one way or another whether or not they were. As I've informed everybody here, my client is the one that's going to make that statement when the time is right for him to make that statement. What I've said is that the letter talks about the depth of the relationship between Aaron Hernandez and Kyle Kennedy.
Last question, guys.
You said they were
Hold on,
close
I'll
friends.
clarify my answer.
You said they were close friends. Why did they want to live together as cellmates? What precipitated that? Just because they wanted to spend more time together? And was your client the last person to spend time with Aaron Hernandez before he was found dead? And do you know if they smoked K2 synthetic marijuana that night?
My client, the night in question, my client was not in the general population. He was taken out of the general population that evening. My client believes that he was the last person to see Mr. Hernandez before he was put into a cell, but because he was removed from the general population, what he told me, he can't 100% be sure about that.
Why was he removed, from general population?
He violated the jailhouse rule.
What's so complicated about the relationship that you can't just say there was nothing romantic about it? Why would he feel the need to address this separately from you just saying that there was no romantic relationship?
You would have to ask him that question.
What did
Larry,
they want?
this whole thing about this gay relationship, their relationship, it's caused a lot of angst with the Hernandez family. Rumors are going around. Why can't you just clear that up? How would you characterize the nature of their relationship? You talk to him a lot. You know your client.
So I haven't talked to him a lot. I've talked to him 2 days, and as you can imagine, the first day was he was in segregated population. There was a glass window between us. There was guards on both sides of the doors, so it wasn't necessarily the time to have any kind of an in-depth conversation. So the first day that we were there, we established the scope of my representation, what would occur. Second day we were there, we were in a room with a guard on eyeball-to-eyeball suicide watch. So again, we haven't had the true privacy that an attorney and a client would normally have. So part of the reason is we haven't, quite frankly, had the right time and space to have any of these conversations. And the second part of the reason is that at this point in time, my client is the one that he doesn't want. He's, it's funny, these people, they go to jail and they're cut off from the outside world, but at the same time, somehow they have access to almost everything that's said about them. So my client has read a lot of things that some are true, some are not true. He wants the words about this relationship to come from his mouth.
When would be the first time that can happen? What is his?
Well, I assume he would have to be taken off suicide watch first and foremost, and brought back into a situation where the jail would allow him access to the press.
Does your client know why he committed suicide, Aaron Hernandez?
My client is stunned. What my client told me was that Aaron Hernandez was one of the most powerful forces as a person that he's ever known. Aaron could take any situation, no matter how bad it seemed, and turn it into a positive, and was always smiling. That's the way that my relationship.
Does your client believe that Aaron Hernandez deliberately committed suicide?
My client doesn't have any basis other than his knowledge of Aaron as a person to make that decision or make that determination.
Are you saying that your client was put into solitary before Hernandez's death?
The evening before.
And was that because he was doing drugs with Aaron Hernandez?
I have no idea.
Do you know any kind of, the day that Aaron Hernandez was acquitted and was returned to Souza, do you know of any type of celebration or any type of event that involved the inmates after Aaron Hernandez was acquitted of the double murder? Did your client mention anything out of the ordinary that may have happened?
What my client had stated about that in general, and not specifically as he came back from the double murder acquittal, was that typically when somebody came out of solitary or somebody had come back from a court case, then they would often be greeted by their friends with a bag of food and, you know, the luxuries, as you would put it, in a jail. So I wouldn't say that they had a party per se, and I don't have any information as it relates to that particular day. But what I can tell you is that my client informed me that it would be customary if somebody would come out of the hole, for example, they would be met by his friends and they would have, you know, extra chips or Snickers bars.
When was the last time that your client talked to Aaron Hernandez?
The day of his suicide.
Have you spoken to your client about how he became so close with Aaron Hernandez, things they bonded over, or you know just how they met in general?
Yes, and this will be the last question. What I will tell you is that Aaron Hernandez and my client knew of each other prior to my client going into the Shirley facility.
How?
Through correspondence.
Larry, just to clear up one last thing. Larry,
That's all for now.
no, Larry, just to clear up one last thing. You say the letter was not addressed to your client. How do you know the letter was to him or about him? How do you know any of that?
Well, what I said was the letter wasn't addressed, our information is the letter wasn't addressed to anybody.
Right, so how do you know
So,
it was even
Two
aimed
ways.
at your
My
client?
client, number one, as I said earlier, believes that based upon the closeness of the relationship that he and Aaron Hernandez had, there would be nobody else that he would have written the third letter to. And the second issue is because my client was informed by somebody behind the walls of the prison that there was a third letter that was left for him.
So
A
was that
prison
a guard
official?
or another
I don't know who it was. My client did not tell me if it was a guard or an official. That's all that he told me.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us how to spell Kira?
P-U-R-E.
D-U-R-E.